everybody, welcome to Miss McGuire online class, and today we are covering Introduction to the Human Body. Okay, that didn't work, so let me try it again. Now it's working. Okay, so all good. So what is anatomy and what is physiology? So anatomy studies structure and physiology studies function. So when talking about anatomy, we can divide it into several branches like gross anatomy. When you study pretty large structures like organs, for example, you can study brain anatomy, heart anatomy, kidney anatomy, right? Something that you can see with naked eye. Microscopic anatomy will include mostly histology. When you study a structure of maybe the same organs, but you use microscope and you're looking at tissues that made that organ. You can study regional anatomy. It can be, again, anatomy of, for example, of the brain, or face and neck anatomy, or upper limb anatomy. In this course, we will mostly focus on systemic anatomy when we will talk about body systems. We will cover 12 body systems, including respiratory system, digestive system, urinary system, reproductive system, skeletal, muscular system. So we will talk about organs that made this body system, how they connected, what the structure is, how they work together to maintain homeostasis of your body. So systemic anatomy, again, focus on organ systems. Right, and physiology studies function. So the main focus of physiology is homeostasis. So explanation how your body keeps stable internal environment despite the changes that happen outside of your body. And physiology mostly includes biochemistry and biophysics. Let's begin with levels of organizations. So if you look at human body over here, obviously, your body is made up from different parts, right? So if you kind of want to take body apart, that of course we don't want to do, but imaginary, if you take a body apart and we get to a smaller and smaller and smaller levels of organization, we will end up with atoms. So here on the top of this pyramid, you will see atoms, and this is the chemical level. Then atoms form molecules, and this will be our molecular level. Molecules can form, or atoms can form macromolecules like your carbohydrates, proteins, DNA, right? And those macromolecules will form cells. And this will be a cellular level of organization. So a variety of molecules will combine to form the fluid and organelles of a body cell. And cell is the structural and functional unit of life. Now, similar cells that perform common function form a tissue. And this will be a tissue level of organization. And we will discuss different types of tissues, their functions, their locations later in this course. When we put several tissue types together, we can form an organ, right? And then we are at the organ level of organization. So, and it's two or more different tissue combined to form an organ. For example, your urinary bladder, right? Or your heart, or your lungs, or your liver. So when we mention an organ, we always need to keep in mind that it's made of more than one tissue type. Let's say your skin. Many students still think that skin is a tissue. That's not correct, because your skin is made of different tissue types. It's made of epithelial tissue, connective tissue. It's also innervated, so it has nervous tissue. So skin is an organ of the integumentary system. Now, organs, two or more organs that work closely together to perform the function of a body system form organ systems, right? And you already know some examples of body systems, such as urinary system, digestive, cardiovascular, respiratory, integumentary, your skeletal system. And then all the system together, they work together to perform the function of an independent organism, right? So, and that's what makes you, right? So with the smallest, progressively to entire organism, this is called levels of organization. Okay, and here we at the level of organization that is body systems, right? So we will briefly talk about different body systems and their major organs, and maybe like one or two functions only. But before doing it, we want to look at on this diagram that show interrelationship among body organ systems. So obviously all your systems work together to keep you alive, right? And keep this homeostasis of your body. So on this diagram, you can see integumentary system, that is your skin, that protects your whole body from the external environment. And then you have digestive system that takes in nutrients, breaks them down, and eliminates unabsorbed matter in the form of feces, right? So it's kind of, it's a, your digestive system is made of GI tract and accessory organs. And here we see only GI tract that is pretty much continuous tube from one opening, that is your oral cavity, to another opening that is the anal cavity, right? So it's tubes that has different parts, different with different functions, maybe different histology, but it's still tube with two openings, right? Then you have respiratory systems that takes in oxygen and eliminates carbon dioxide. You have urinary systems that eliminates nitrogenous waste and excess ions, and also keep your water balance. And here it shows you have your cardiovascular system that via the blood distributes that oxygen and nutrients to all your body cells, deliver waste and carbon dioxide to disposal organs. And this is simple representation, because plus to this relationship, you have your nervous system that regulates your activities. You have your endocrine system that also regulates your organs and allows them to communicate with each other. And you have your muscular system together with nervous system allow for movement. Right, so, but the good kind of good thing about this diagram, just to show you that all systems are interconnected. Okay, so in the first system you see over here is the integumentary system that includes, like any body system, it's made up of organs, and organs of integumentary system would be your skin, your nails, your hair. And the function would be to enclose internal body structure and also site of many sensory receptors. Another system is a skeletal system, and some organs would be your bones, your joints. The joints are not, joints would join your bone together, and they do have some obviously anatomical structure. They do not really consider to be separate organs. It's just how two organs communicate. And cartilage is also part of the skeletal system. And some of the functions is to support the body and allow you for movement. Of course, together with a muscular system. You cannot move your bones without muscles and nerves, right? So here's another example how a system needs to communicate and to perform one common function, for example, like external movement. You need bones, you need muscles, and you need nerves, right? So next system is muscular system, and organs, skeletal muscles, tendons are also part of the muscular system, and some functions are movement, together with the skeletal and nervous system, and maintaining of body temperature, right? And again, those are not complete list of the functions. I told you that we will cover just few functions only, because this is really the introductory video. So nervous system, that is, some organs are brain, spinal cord, peripheral nerves, and functions would include detect and process sensory information and activates bodily responses. So really what nervous system does, it processes sensory information and send out motor information to your muscles and your glands, right? That's a nervous system. Endocrine system, another system of communication together with the nervous system, and some organs will include your endocrine glands, such as pituitary gland, thyroid gland, adrenal gland, ovaries, testes, and function will include regulation of body processes, secretion of hormones. I don't know, I wouldn't call it really a function. This is the mean. This is the tool your endocrine system use, but function is control, regulation, and communication between your body systems, between your organs, and also between your whole organism and external environment. Cardiovascular system, some of the organs, heart, blood vessels, even blood considered to be an organ, right? I believe so. You will correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, and what is some function of cardiovascular system? Deliver oxygen and nutrients to the tissue, equalize body temperature, and also obviously delivering of the waste product to the organs that can eliminate those waste products, such as carbon dioxide is delivered to your lungs and nitrogenous waste delivered to your kidneys. We continue briefly with organ system, lymphatic system, that includes such organs as thymus, spleen, lymph nodes, lymphatic vessels, and the function would include the defense against pathogens. And that's why in some textbooks, you will see instead of lymphatic system, you will see immune system, because the framework of the immune system is lymphatic. That's why this function over here is defense against pathogens. And another function of the lymphatic system is to return fluids from your tissues, interstitial fluid, excess interstitial fluid, back to blood. Respiratory system and organs will include trachea, bronchioles, alveoli, lungs, and functions are removal of carbon dioxide from the body, delivering oxygen to the blood. Digestive system, and again, the organs start with your tongue, right? With your oral cavity, you have esophagus, you have stomach, you have the whole GI tract, right? And accessory organs such as liver, pancreas. salivary glands. Over here, it shows you gallbladder. And function will include processing of food for use by the body and removal of undigested food. Urinary system and organs will include kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, urethra, and functions are to control water balance and removal of nitrogenous waste. It's also control the balance of the electrolytes and removal some electrolytes from your plasma of your blood. And we finish up with reproductive systems, male and female, and function of reproductive system include the reproduction and also synthesis, production of sex hormones, right? Plus, well, your reproductive system has your primary reproductive organs that produce gametes. Then you have a system of tubes that deliver sperm to ovum for, again, for a reproduction purpose. And the major organ will include ovaries, testes, uterus, epididymis, external genitalia. What is interesting about reproductive systems, this is the only system that does not function fully your entire life. So you pretty much, and this is the only system that is not, how to put it nicely, it's not essential for individual survival, right? So you really, if your reproductive system is messed up, you're not gonna die. And when you, before you get to puberty, it does not function at its full potential. And after 50s or 60s, again, the function of reproductive system declines. Right, okay, so anyway, those are 12 body systems that we will try to cover during these online lectures. Okay, so what I wanna mention over here is that anatomy and physiology are inseparable. Function always reflects structure, and what structure can do depends on its specific form. And this principle is called principle of complementarity of structure and function. So that pretty much give you idea that if you know function, you can predict structure, or if you know structure, you can predict the function of that organ. For example, if let's say we will cover tissues, and we will talk about simple and stratified epithelial tissue. So if you know that it's a stratified squamous epithelium, we can we can imagine that stratified means many layers. So we can predict the function should be probably protection, right? Covering and protection. But if you're talking, for example, secretion or filtration through epithelial tissue, then you can predict that that tissue should be simple, only one layer of cells to allow this function to move smoothly, right? So you cannot filtrate really efficiently if you have many cells. It would be difficult for filtration or for absorption, for secretion, right? So I hope it does make sense. So if we know that, if we know particular structure, we can associate function with this structure. Okay. Okay, so let's look at functions that keep you alive, right? So what are those functions your body conduct on a daily basis that keep you alive. So maintenance of life involves organization, movement, responsiveness, metabolism, reproduction, growth, and development. And now we will look at all of these characteristics in a little bit more details. So we already talked about organization. Remember that slide when we had this pyramid and we start with atoms and then molecules and cells and tissues, right? We talked about levels of organization, and this is a property of life. So you have trillions of cells, multiple compartments, starting with atomic structures from the smallest one way to the molecule, to the cells, and to entire organism. So we already talked about it, so I'm not gonna repeat it again. Metabolism. Metabolism is another characteristic of life. And metabolism is defined as the sum total of all chemical reactions that occurs in the body. And the metabolism has two hands, right? Catabolism and anabolism. And catabolism is a set of metabolic pathways that breaks down molecules into smaller units and release energy. And anabolism is kind of like opposite to catabolism. This is where your body builds up larger molecules from a smaller, and energy is actually stored inside those chemical bonds of a large molecules, right? So, anabolism is endogonic process, and catabolism is exergonic process. Energy is released during catabolic reactions or stored during anabolic reaction. Now, students very often confuse metabolism with digestion. So let's go ahead and compare and see how metabolism is different or maybe similar to digestion. So what is the definition for metabolism? Metabolism is the sum of all chemical and physiological processes occurring in an organism body, when digestion is the sum of all chemical and mechanical actions occurring in the digestive system only. The main process that metabolism involves chemical processes, and digestion involves both chemical and mechanical processes. Type of reaction. In metabolism, we already mentioned, right? It can be anabolism or catabolism. In digestion, it's only catabolism. Systems that are involved. All the systems are incorporated with metabolic activities. That means all your system, right? Your cardiovascular, your respiratory, every single cell of your body goes through metabolic processes, through anabolism, catabolism. However, in the digestion takes place only at the digestive system. And metabolism is vital for all living beings, and digestion usually takes place only in animals. So here's the difference between metabolism and digestion. Digestion is a part of metabolism, but it's not the same. So now this slide is just for your information. I think it's very interesting to see what's your body is made of, because we talked about atoms and molecules, right? And macromolecules that make up your body. So what's your body made of? So average teenager, 131 pounds, consists of the following: 17% protein. So let's start with water. Water is more than 60% of a body of a younger person. When we get older, the water content decreases, right? So we get drier, right, when we get older. But more than 60% is water. Then next, proteins, about 14% fat, Now, minerals like calcium, sodium, potassium is 6%. And the least amount of what is this? Macromolecules, right, that make up your body are carbohydrates, actually, only 1.5%. So we are not made of carbohydrates. So you probably heard that, well, carbohydrates are bread, right, pancakes, candies, all sweet stuff, right? And you probably heard that many times, don't eat lots of cake, don't eat lots of bread. But look, even if you eat bread and candies and cakes, your body has only 1.5, your body makeup is only 1.5% of carbohydrates. So what happened with all those carbohydrates? Well, you use carbohydrates for energy, right, to synthesize ATP, but many of these carbohydrates, unfortunately, will be transformed into fat. That's why we have, pretty good amount of fat composition in our body, right? 14%. Okay, so next property of life is ability to adjust, right? And but this is a topic of biology more than anatomy, where you would learn that individual organisms adjust. Yeah, they do not adapt, populations adapt. So we kind of like leave it like that. But we have this ability to adjust to our, maybe it's adjust, it's not adapt, adjust. For example, if the temperature, outside temperature increases, you have this ability to maintain your homeostasis and adjust, right? You're gonna start sweating, your face will get red, so you can radiate some of this heat off your body. So that's how you're adjusting. Another property of life is movement. And it's not only your physical movement within a space, right? Like when you move your parts of your body using your skeletal muscles, you also have lots of movement going on inside your body, right? Your blood is moving through your blood vessels, the oxygen moves from alveoli to your blood, lots of ions are moving through cell membrane. So there's a lots of movement within your body as well. Your chyme, your food is moving through digestive system and so on. So movement is a property of life. Development and differentiation is another property of life. So we all started with one single cell, and then this cell divides through a process called mitosis. It's differentiated into different cells and different tissues in your body, right? And right, like one cell, you kind of have the same DNA in your neuron and in your epithelial cells, but they look different, they perform different functions because of the expression of specific genes. Some genes are turned on and some genes are turned off, depends on what kind of cell is that. And this is what differentiation is. Also, growth and reproduction are another function of life, right? So, growth is not just, we're not just getting bigger, we also would say your cells can replace damaged cells or cells that are not functioning properly, right? That would be also part of the growth process. Reproduction obviously is not essential for every single individual. You can live your whole life and do not have kids, but for species as a whole and for life in general, reproduction is very important function. There is no life without ability to reproduce. Okay, now next topic are survival needs. So this one was, let's see if if I can do that. I'm just sometimes when I exit my presentation mode and then for some reason it's not working anymore. So, but we discussed a function of life, right? All this function, organization, movement, responsiveness, metabolism, production, growth, development, right? This is what keep you alive, all right? What your body does. And now what do you need to stay alive, right? What are your survival needs? So you obviously need nutrients, you need oxygen, you need water, or everybody would know that. But we also need normal body temperature and appropriate atmospheric pressure. So oxygen and nutrients. We need oxygen and nutrients for several functions, right? Oxygen is needed for ATP production, and ATP is your, that's a molecule that pretty much needed for most of your cellular processes. So that's a source of energy your cells use to perform their metabolic functions, their everyday function. Like you need ATP for your muscles to contract. You need ATP for your glands to secrete. You need ATP for your heart to beat, for your liver to synthesize proteins, for your kidneys to filter your blood. You need ATP for your neurons to process your sensory information, the touch. So everything inside your body pretty much depends on ATP, and you can make ATP if you have oxygen, right? So oxygen for ATP production. Nutrients, including macronutrients, micronutrients, and water, also in that category. And nutrients also will provide you with energy for ATP synthesis. Nutrients provide materials for growth of cells and tissue, and provides materials for repair of cell tissues. Now you need temperature and pressure range. So the normal body temperature is about 98.6 Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. And this is where your body functions the best. And you need this kind of narrow range of internal temperature for all your enzymes to function properly, all right, for all your organs to carry on their function. So if you look at this diagram here, it shows how temperature affect the rate of reactions in your body, right? So here we have our optimal temperature and we have the highest rate of reaction. And as we go low towards a low or higher temperature, right, it will affect reactions, chemical reactions in your body, because it will affect enzymes, and enzymes are needed for reactions to go on, right? They are catalysts. So when heat energy decreases, we have less collisions between enzyme and substrate. So we have decrease in the rate of reaction, but when temperature increases, it's actually damage your enzymes, right? And it can denature the enzyme. Enzymes are protein, and with increase of temperature, change of pH, those proteins can lose their shape. This is what denature is, and when they lose their shape, they cannot function, or their function changes or decreases. We also need pressure for normal functioning, and you need pressure to dissolve gases in the plasma of your blood, your ability to breathe, right? So this is another survival need, normal pressure range. Okay, and here we get to a major topic of physiology here, that is homeostasis. So homeostasis is a maintenance of relatively stable internal condition despite continuous changes in environment. Your homeostasis is dynamic, state. That means that actually this environment is constantly changing inside you. You're not set to always a constant temperature, constant glucose level, constant oxygen level, right? It's always fluctuates, but you always work hard, your body system, your cells, they work hard to maintain it's relatively stable, right? And all organ systems contribute. So over here, we can look at one of the example of homeostasis, and this is called arch, homeostatic arch, and we'll see the components. So homeostatic control of variables involves three components: receptor, control center, and effector. So what this diagram shows that this is your balance of your body, right? It can be your temperature, or it can be sugar level in your blood, or your cholesterol level, right? So you try to stay in a balance. Now, when you have some kind of stimulus, and stimulus is change in the environment. So for example, my blood glucose level is normal, but then I go and eat 5 pieces of birthday cake. That's the stimulus, right? I have more sugar in my blood and my body is out of balance, all right? Or temperature outside can change. It can be 120 degrees if I go to high desert, right? That outside environment puts pressure. It's a stimulus, it's a change. Put pressure on my homeostasis, on my balance. And even if temperature doesn't increase and I just go and exercise, right? When I exercise, I produce more heat. I require more glucose delivered to my muscles, right? So I have some external stimulus to my skeletal muscles. And again, I'm out of balance. So that stimulus need to be, this change in your balance need to be picked up by receptors. So receptors will detect this change in your internal environment, and it will send signal to control center. And this pathway from receptor to control center is called afferent, start with E, afferent pathway. So this is input, information sent along afferent pathway to control center. So your control center can be your brain, or you can it can be your spinal cord, or it can be your endocrine glands, right? But whatever this control center is, it's gonna analyze the information received, right, through this afferent pathway, and it's gonna make a decision how to respond. And your control center gonna have output. Information will be sent to the effector organs, and this pathway is called efferent pathway, right? And effectors will be your, you don't have that many effectors in your body. Your effectors can be your muscles, skeletal, smooth, cardiac, or your glands. And it can be endocrine glands, it can be your salivary glands that are exocrine glands, it can be your sweat glands, right? But those effectors will respond, and the response of effector feeds back to reduce the effect of the stimulus and return variable to homeostatic level, right? So we back to the balance. All right, so this is a homeostatic arch with a receptor, control center, and effector. So there's actually 2 types of feedback. So when your body are out of balance, out of homeostatic balance, you can have negative feedback or positive feedback. Negative feedback, this is the one that maintains your homeostasis, and positive feedback actually takes your body further away from homeostasis. But about positive in the next slide. So let's talk about negative feedback and look at this example very quickly. So it's a response that reduces or shuts off original stimulus. So for example, body temperature goes up, you want it to go down, right? Glucose level goes up, you want it to go down. That would be your negative feedback. So, and here examples are regulation of body temperature. This is a nervous system mechanism. That means that control center will be your nervous system, or regulation of blood glucose level by insulin. It's endocrine system mechanism. That means that control center are going to be your pancreas, your endocrine gland. So here's a very commonly used example of negative feedback, body temperature, right? So, so here's you in a balance, right? And then your body temperature rises. So that's the stimulus. Receptors, temperature sensitive cells in skin and the brain will pick up this change in the body temperature, and it's gonna send signal to your brain. Thermoregulatory center in your brain, that will be a control center, right? And your brain, through the efferent pathway, gonna send signal to your effector organs, for example, your sweat glands. Sweat glands are not the only effector organs, but for this example, this is what we have. So it will stimulate your sweat glands. Sweat glands will be activated, and you start sweating. And when you sweat, right, your sweat evaporates, and it takes this excess heat of your body, and your body cools down, right? So back to normal temperature. Or it can be a different stimulus, right? It can be your body falls, right? It's cold, stimulus is cold. So again, receptors in your skin and the brain pick up those changes, send information to your brain through afferent pathway. Your brain compares this information with a checkpoint, right? Like, okay, the body temperature need to be 37 degrees of Celsius, and now it's below, right? So that's not right. This is homeostatic imbalance. Your brain gonna send now signal to the effector organs, in this example, your skeletal muscle, through efferent pathway, and you start shivering. And when you shiver, you know, this movement will produce some heat, and it will warm you up. And what would be the response? The body temperature rises, right? So that's a negative feedback. So when we have a rise in the temperature, we want to put it down. When temperature goes down, we want to bring it back up. Examples of positive feedback. So first of all, the positive feedback response, it's a response that enhances or exaggerates the original stimulus. So pretty much it wants this, it takes your body even further away from homeostasis. This is not very common, but we do have situations when we depend on positive feedback, when our whole life depends on it. So what would be example? Well, example would be enhancement of labor contraction by oxytocin. Then we will look over here in a second. But another example is platelet plaque formation and blood clotting. So when you start this cascade of blood clotting, you don't want it to stop, right? You want it progress until you stop bleeding, right? Lactation, ovulation are another example of positive feedback. So let's look over here. So this lady over here is in labor. So the baby is pushing on a cervix, right? So head of baby pushes against cervix. Now nerve impulses from the cervix transmitted to the brain, and brain start stimulate pituitary gland to secrete oxytocin, and oxytocin carried in the bloodstream to the uterus, and oxytocin stimulate uterine contraction, and what it does, it produces even harder push on the cervix, right? So you already have baby pushing against the cervix, right? And this starts the, trigger the oxytocin release, and we don't want to stop it, right? Oxytocin level goes up in your blood, right? And you don't want to stop it. You want more and more and more oxytocin. You want to increase the uterine contraction until baby is born, right? You don't want to stop right in the middle of labor, right? Because your body like, oh, too much oxytocin in the blood, right? Let's use this negative feedback and, you know, remove it, reduce it. No, you want this progression of increase in oxytocin level until stimulus is removed. When the stimulus, that is a baby, is actually out of the uterus, right? Stimulus is removed and you return back to your normal state. But that's a positive feedback when we enhance or exaggerate the original stimulus. Okay. Okay, we are not even close to the end of this chapter. So still a lot to cover. But now we're pretty much to anatomy, specifically to anatomy, and we will talk very briefly about anatomical position and directional terms. So standard anatomical position, your body is erect, your feet slightly apart, your palms facing forward, with thumbs pointing away from the body. And you need anatomical position as a reference, right, to describe any, let's say, injury on a patient or location of bones or muscles. You need this reference point to be able to say, well, this muscle is superficial to this muscle, right? Or this muscle is lateral to that muscle, all right, and so on. So anatomical position is your reference point, and directional terms describe one body structure in relation to another body structure. And directional terms always based on a standard anatomical position. And in the directional terms, when you use right or left, it's always a patient right and left, not your own right and left. Okay, so over here we can see anatomical, this guy over here is in anatomical position. This is anterior view, this is posterior view. And we have our regional terminology here. So the first you see here, prone and supine, right? So this, it would be if you laying down on your back, you would be in supine position. If you lying down on your belly, you will be in a prone position, right? So, well, here, there is not much I can do, guys, to help you just to memorize all these terms, right? So, I'm not gonna cover it right now, but I do encourage you to look at all these terms, right? And try to memorize them, and we will go over them in class. Okay, next, directional terms. Directional terms are essential for describing relative location. And if you look over here, again, this lady is in anatomical position, and we have superior region up, inferior. We also can use cranial instead of superior and caudal instead of inferior. To the front of the body is called anterior or ventral, and back of your body is called posterior or dorsal. If you have some structures that are close to midline, we call it medial. If it's away from midline, we call it lateral. Right, for example, sternum is medial, right? And ribs are lateral when we using anterior view. Like superior, your head is superior and your abdomen is inferior. Your sternum is anterior and your spine is posterior. Right? Those are examples. Now, another pair of terms are proximal and distal. And proximal and distal are only used for your extremities, for your arms and for your legs. And proximal means close to the axial part of your body, close to the torso, to the attachment to the body. And distal is further away from body attachment. So for arms and for legs, right? So over here, your arm, you have humerus over here. So you can say humerus is proximal, and bones here are your radius and ulna, and radius and ulna are distal. Compare with humerus. Or femur is proximal and tibia is distal. We also use planes, right, anatomical planes, and those are imaginary planes that divide your body into right and left, front and back, superior and inferior part. And three most commonly used planes are frontal, that divides your body into anterior and posterior, sagittal, that divides your body into right and left section. And if sagittal goes right in the middle, then it's mid-sagittal. If it's not exactly in the middle of the body or your organs, then it's parasagittal. And transverse plane divides your body into superior and inferior regions. Also, in this chapter, we cover body cavities. So body cavities are needed to house your organs, right? If you do not have body cavities, you do not have place to have your organs, right? So if you don't have your cranial cavity, you don't have place to put your brain in, right? Or if you don't have abdominal cavity, you don't have room for your abdominal viscera, like where to put your stomach, where to put your liver, right? So body cavities are spaces within your body that allow room for your internal organs. However, we do have open body cavities, right? And some of them, like your urogenital cavities, those just, opening to the environment, or your oral cavity. But here we're specifically looking at closed body cavities. And those body cavities can be divided into dorsal and ventral. So they are the largest. So the dorsal body cavity include cranial and vertebral, and your brain is inside cranial cavity and spinal cord inside vertebral cavities. Those cavities are also most protected cavities. Let's say your cranial cavity, almost, it's enclosed within your bones, cranial bones, right? And those bones are fused through the fissures. Through the, let me see, okay, cannot remember it right now. I'll tell you in a minute. So, so anyway, those bones are fused together, that pretty much there is no space in between. So your brain is very, very well protected. Sutures, that's what it's called. So the bones are joined through the sutures. Then you have your ventral body cavities, and they include thoracic cavity and abdominal pelvic cavities. There is a separation between thoracic and abdominal pelvic cavities that is your diaphragm. So diaphragm is a skeletal muscle that separates thoracic from abdominal pelvic. Thoracic cavity includes superior mediastinum that shows here in kind of yellow color, pericardial cavity, and those are just behind your sternum. And lateral to those cavities, we have two pleural cavities that have your lungs. So your lungs are inside pleural cavities. Your heart is inside pericardial cavities. And in superior mediastinum, you have your trachea, you have your large blood vessels, you have nerves, right? So that's pretty much everything, let's see, everything except of lungs and your heart, right? That's superior mediastinum. Abdominal pelvic cavity can be further divided into abdominal and pelvic, and abdominal cavity houses your digestive system, right, most of your GI tract, your liver, your pancreas, and then pelvic cavity has your reproductive organs. If you're female, it would be the uterus, it will be urinary bladder, right? So that's the closed body cavities. Now, abdominal region of your body can be divided into quadrants. So actually, the most commonly used is the easiest one. This one over here that says right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, left lower quadrant. So this is what used in medical field. In anatomy, we want to be a little bit more specific. So we divide it into 9 quadrants. So right in the middle, we have epigastric, umbilical, hypogastric, right hypochondriac, left hypochondriac, right lumbar, left lumbar, right iliac, and left iliac. All right, so just a smaller quadrants that pretty much give you more specific information where different parts, the organs are located. Yeah, and this is used for describing location of the viscera. For example, liver is mostly located into right upper quadrant and stomach in the left upper quadrant. Urinary bladder is located between right and left lower quadrants. Right, if you use this one, it will be in hypogastric region. But as I said, the 4 quadrants division used more often and easier to remember anyway. Okay, and we're getting close to the end of this lecture, so stay with me, okay? I know it's a lot, but you can pause and start watching again, you know, in a couple hours or maybe even next day, right? So I hope you're still watching it here, especially if you're on my class, then you have to do it, right? Okay, so let's talk about membranes in the ventral body cavities. So what are our ventral body cavities? Thoracic cavity, right? And abdominal pelvic cavity. So organs inside these cavities and the cavities themselves, they covered with the membrane. And this membrane is called serosa or serous membrane. It's a double layered membrane that covers surfaces in the ventral body cavity and organs in the ventral body cavities, thoracic and abdominal pelvic. So if you look at this picture here, I like it because it's really give you idea of how the serosa works. So imagine you have a fist and you're gonna put it inside a balloon, and balloon has air inside, right? Then what will happen? One wall of the balloon will be at hands to your wrist, right there. And then you will have space in this situation, it's an air space, and then another part of the wall. Of course, in your body, this space, it's not air space. This space is filled with fluid, and name for this fluid is serous fluid. And instead of wall of a balloon, it's your membrane. So that's a serous membrane that looks similar, right? And it always has visceral layer that cover an organ and parietal layer that covers the cavity. And there is space between them that is called cavity, right? And there is a fluid in this space that's called serous fluid, right? So parietal serosa lines internal body cavity walls, parietal, and visceral covers internal organs. And viscera is the name for your ventral organs. Double layers are separated by slit-like cavity filled with serous fluid. And this is for lubrication, reduction of tension, right? And allow organs move smoothly, right, protection. So that's what is this serous fluid is floor. Now, because this serosa covers your thoracic cavity and your abdominal cavity, so many organs, right? So many spaces, it has different names. And if it covers your heart, it's called pericardium. So you have visceral pericardium that covers your heart. Parietal pericardium covers the cavity where your heart is located. If this serosa covers your lungs, we call it pleura. And we have visceral pleura and parietal pleura. And remember, visceral pleura will cover your lungs. Parietal pleura will cover the cavities, pleural cavity. And if this serosa cover your abdominal organ and pelvic, abdominal pelvic, not all the abdominal and not all the pelvic organs are located within this peritoneum, right? But let's take it kind of simple for now, right? If this serosa cover your abdominal and pelvic organs, we call it peritoneum, right? And we have visceral peritoneum and parietal peritoneum. Okay, and this is our last slide. And this, oh no, next one is the last one. It just kind of relates those planes that we talk about, right? Sagittal, coronal, transverse to medical imaging. So when you go to the hospital or somebody goes, right, and they take this medical image, for example, MRI or CAT scan. So they produce these images in a different planes as well. So over here, you can see how MRI scans correspond with different planes of the body. And the last slide tell us about medical imaging technologies, right? And we have more than 4, but we're gonna look at 4 over here: CT scan, MRI, ultrasound, and X-ray. And I apologize for quality of this diagram. The quality is not the best, but the information is really the best that I found. So let's go ahead and read advantages, disadvantages, and common uses. So CT scan, it's fast, detailed images in 3 dimensions. Magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, can be more detailed than CT scan and uses no radiation because CT scan uses X-ray. Ultrasound. Ultrasound are cheaper than CT scan and uses no radiation. And X-ray, fast and cheap with a relatively low radiation dose. So we have CT scan and X-rays that both use radiation, right? And we have MRI and ultrasounds that do not use radiation, so they kind of safer for your body. Now, what are disadvantages? So CT scan requires the most radiation. Chest CT is equals to about 100 chest X-ray, but it gives you this detailed, right, 3-dimensional image. MRI is more expensive than CT, and it's also require patient to remain still for half an hour or more. MRI is, this is this tube where you put a patient on and you hear this boom, 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 boom sound for about 45 minutes. And it also cannot be used on a patient with some pacemaker or any metal parts in their bodies, because that's used a very strong magnet. That's what MRI is, magnetic resonance image. Ultrasound disadvantages is it's a lower image quality than CT. And effectiveness largely depends on technician skills. So you really need to be good at interpretation of this ultrasound diagram. A disadvantage of X-ray is that it only provides 2D image with far less detail than other methods. So common use, CT scan detecting solid tumors and other problems in the abdomen and chest. MRI commonly used to detect brain abnormalities and soft tissue injuries. Ultrasound used a lot in the fetal diagnosing of appendicitis in children, and X-ray is used to diagnose broken bone, pneumonia, or interstitial blockage like a cyst that can grow within tissues. Right, so here we have some advantages, disadvantages, common uses, and this is the last slide in this lecture. So the only part that we did not cover, because I'm thinking like, oh my goodness, this lecture is getting ridiculously long, but I'm gonna do it at the end. So if you guys are too tired, you can just turn it off and we will do it in class. But I went back to this image and I just briefly tell you those regional terms, right? So we have cranium or your skull and a facial region. In a facial region, you will have a frontal region, ocular region of your eyes, buccal region, that is your cheeks, your otic region or oris, that's where your ear is, your nasal region, your oris or mouth, and your mental region or your cheek. So now instead of, I don't know, cheekbones, you need to use buccal region. Instead of chin, you need to say mental region. So this is how, you know, I understand you at the beginning of your journey with anatomy and physiology, but make this language your first language, right? Then remember all these terms. You're gonna use it if you go to medical field, nursing program, right? You're gonna use it on a, you know, pretty much every day. So just learn this terminology. Do not call it neck anymore, call it cervical region, right? And then, okay, so we pretty much cover the head. Let's look at the posterior view. We have cephalic region and we have cervical or posterior cervical and anterior cervical over here. Right, then we have a trunk that will include thoracic region, mammillary region, abdominal region, umbilical region, pelvis, inguinal region, pubic region. Right. Also, I can include over here axillary region, that is your armpit. Now, if you look at the arm, we have this region over here. It's called acromial region. So right, just the tip over here, acromial region. Then we have axillary region, again, your armpit. We have brachial region, antecubital region, antebrachial region, carpal region, palmar region, digital or your fingers, and pollex. Now we're moving back. I think I forgot this coxal region on the side, right, of your hip. Then we have femoral region, patellar region, crus or crural region or crus, that's your leg. Then we have tarsus, we have digitals, and hallux is your great toe. And pedal region or pes, that's your foot. In a posterior view, some of the terminology is the same, like brachial. We have anterior brachial, posterior brachial. Now, this part, this region is called our olecranon region. Then we have, again, antebrachial, anterior, posterior, antebrachial. Manus is your hand. This is where manual work came from, manus. So you have your dorsum of the back, you have lumbar region, you have gluteal region. Okay, femoral region, we have anterior and posterior. Now behind your patella region is a popliteal region. On anterior side, you have crural and you have sura or sural region. And the posterior side, you have calcaneus region, that your heel of the foot, and plantar is the sole, right? And I think that's pretty much it. Now, how to remember it? Many of these will make sense, like umbilical region, right? Like mammillary region where your mammillary glands are, maybe like oral or ocular or nasal. Some of them will make sense, patellar, you know where your patella is. I would think like 50% of this terminology will make sense for you. Another 50% make flashcards, but make sure you remember those regional terms. Okay. Well, that's it for this lecture, right? So this was an introduction to the human body. Thank you for watching, and I hope it was helpful.